Everyone, welcome back to City Bright Knits. Today I'm excited to walk you through a freehand crochet design for this dress that I've just finished using Acacia yarn and the Forget-Me-Not granny square motif. We're diving into the heart of crochet garment design, from concept to timeline shaping, yarn, big lessons learned, and come join me along the way. Hi everyone, I'm Christina from City Bright Knits. Welcome back to my cozy little crochet corner. I'm so glad to have you here because today we are wrapping up the month of April and heading into May, and that means summer crochets are on the hook. I can't wait to share with you in this video about a granny square dress that I've designed using the Forget-Me-Not granny square. If you've already seen the tutorial, you'll know what I'm talking about, but today I'm going to be talking all about the design elements and the different things that I've learned as a crochet designer making this dress, and I want to share a few freehand crochet thoughts with you. So let's get into the different parts, the timeline, the concept, the construction, and a few lessons learned as a crochet designer to help me improve my skills, as well as share them with you so that you can make your own crochet wearables at home. So let me just show you the dress that I'm wearing. It is a granny square dress crocheted with Acacia yarn from Hobby. I've just finished it. I'm going to be breaking down all the elements for you in this video, but I do want to show you what it looks like on to model it. So I'm so proud and happy of this dress. I just wanted to create something for summer, and when Hobby approached me about using their Acacia yarn, I was really excited because I had seen Acacia yarn. I've seen other makers using it on socials like Instagram, and the pictures always look so pretty, the stitches look so well defined, but I had never used Acacia yarn. And I love designing for summer. Bright colors are my thing, and warm weather totally makes me inspired for garment design. And so with the Acacia, I loved the idea of it being a cotton blend. It has a little bit of acrylic to it, so it has a beautiful like sheen and shine to it versus a cotton that sometimes just looks a little more flat. And so when I got designing and choosing the colors, I really just go to like Pinterest mood boards to choose my colors. I see things that I've pinned before and kind of just get a color palette based on that. So for this summer, I was really feeling kind of like the blue and white going from spring into summer, just like a classic crisp nautical look. So I decided to go with blue and white, and then I always like to add a little pop of something unexpected. So I used the Acacia print yarn here, and that's where I chose the blue that has like a little bit of swirl worked into it. You can see that it's not just a flat blue, it has a few different colors working in there. So I used a Pinterest board as inspiration for my mood to kind of like just cue colors when it came to ordering, because there's so many beautiful colors available. It can sometimes be overwhelming, but that's just a little trick that I do when choosing color inspiration and things like that. So knowing that I wanted to use the Acacia yarn for this summer design, I wanted to choose a hook size for it. The hook size that's recommended is a 4mm knitting needles or a 5mm crochet hook, but I actually upped that to be a 6mm crochet hook just because it's summer and it's breathable, and I just feel like it gives it these lovely openings while wearing it. So you can see what a 6mm hook square looks like. I came up with the idea to use this square motif, which has a lovely, beautiful, identifiable 5-petal flower in the center. It's identifiable because it has these holes in the middle of the petals, which gives it a really nice look. So while it is a solid granny square, it does have those holes around the petals, which I feel like is just such an interesting floral motif. So I've decided to use this square, which I'm calling the Forget-Me-Not granny square, and there's a full tutorial up on my channel for you. Can I thank you guys, because it's already become such a popular video, and I just feel so proud, and I want to share those with you, more tutorials. So always leave me feedback, give me a like, and I'm coming on with more tutorials for you. But there's a full tutorial on my channel for this Forget-Me-Not granny square motif. If you're interested, you can follow along and make your own dress while you're watching this video. And so I knew that I wanted to do the floral motif. There's so many granny square ideas that you can come up with, right? But I've made this flower motif before, and let me show you because it's something completely different. I actually made this flower motif in a blanket. This is made using Toucan Fine chenille yarn from Hobby, and this blanket is actually a pattern of mine that you can get on hobby.com, and it looks like this. I have beautiful kind of warm tawny colors here, and you can see that because it is this velvet yarn, it's just extra chunky. But I wanted to say to myself, okay, I love that floral motif. I wonder if I do that same floral motif in this yarn, what it would look like. And I'm really pleased with how it came out. So that's how I chose the granny square design for this dress that I'm wearing. And if you're following along and you want to crochet your own freehand dress design, then you can make yours using any square motif that you choose. I recommend this Forget-Me-Not Granny Square. However, if you're making your own based on the dress that I've made, my square is measuring about 4.5 inches wide by 4.5 inches wide per square. So that's the size of this square that I'm using. So if you make yours using Acacia and a 6mm hook, just know that that's about the size that you're gonna get when it comes to measuring. Now, I've gotten a lot of feedback in my comments, and I want to give you information on how to grade and make sizing available for yourself. Because when you're crocheting a garment, especially using granny squares, it seems pretty straightforward that if you have a granny square and you measure how wide it is, that you just need to put however many you need across to fit your body, correct? Like if it's a cardigan or a sweater or a dress, like all you have to do is line them up, easy peasy, which is true. But here's where it gets a little difficult, and here's a lesson learned that I learned for myself in this dress. This Acacia yarn is so beautiful and lightweight, but it also has a beautiful stretch to it. So what does the stretch mean when it comes to a wearable? This granny square goes like this. So when you put it on your body, it has such a positive ease when wearing it. Plus it has this open square motif in the middle. So when you wear it, it's not just on you, it's really gonna stretch about 1 inch either way. So if you have 4 across you and they each are stretching 1 inch, that's an extra 4 inches. So this is something that you should make yourself a little swatch first and give it that little stretch test to see how many squares you are going to need across. For instance, 3 granny squares in the front and 3 granny squares on the back. At the side, I've made little half granny squares here. So these are actually going to account at the waist on either side. So I have 3 at the ribs, this little half granny square here, 3 across the front, and then another half granny square before adding more at the hips. Adding this half granny square is a great way to give you that next step down that you're gonna need to make it kind of smooth and not have, like, if you just went from square granny square to square granny square, you'd have like the fabric would kind of bunch up there. So what I've done is included a half granny square here in the shape of a triangle to allow myself to go from 3 to 4. And I'm going to 4 because I need more room at the hips to fit across. So if I'm taking my tape measure to measure myself, I'm just gonna measure how much I'm gonna need across versus how much I'm gonna need at the waist. So that's why I use a little half granny square here to kind of account for the difference. Now when you're measuring for yourself, it's easier because you can take the tape measure to your own body proportions. If you're making this or a garment for somebody else, I recommend going to the Craft Yarn Council, where they have crochet standards and body measurements for all sizes, from newborn up into full adult, and blankets and hats and things like that. They have the standard sizes that you can use as a reference for yourself in both centimeters and inches. So it's really helpful. They have body chart breakdowns to show you how to measure the bust, the waist, the back, the hem, things like that. It's a really useful standard that I refer to when I do my crochet designs and pattern writing that I recommend for you. I'm gonna link that below for you so you can just easily click that from my description. But that just shows you that I not only measured the granny squares flat when I laid them out, but you also have to do the stretch test when you put it on and see how many you're gonna need. So for me, I actually had fewer around the waist in 2 rows. Let me show you that again. So I have 1 row here, 1 row here, before going to the extra granny square here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 4 across the back. So that's 9 granny squares here and only 6 granny squares here. And then obviously the length, you could just make it as long as you wanted to. For the bust, I decided that there's so many different options you can go with, but I had worked a pattern before that was a bralette pattern. And so I just kind of manipulated the pattern that I worked before, and just instead of making it a bralette, I just used the cups for the front of the dress, and it's actually in an alpine stitch. Alpine stitch gives you a beautiful 3D texture, and it's just a series of double crochets worked into the front post. So once you get the hang of it, it's really quite simple, and it gives it this beautiful textured look. And I just did that for about 11 rows until it gave me the coverage that I desired. When it came to seaming up the front of the dress, really the triangular cups come a lot lower to this point, but in order to get more coverage, I just seamed up the front until needed. You could keep going, or you could even give it a button however you want to. That's part of the great thing of crochet design. And I just figured once I had it measured, I laid it flat and used stitch markers to seam it on. And in the back, what you can see is I've actually added a layer of granny squares to match where the cup comes up. You don't have to do this. You could just leave it at this granny square and your dress would come much lower. It just depends on the amount of coverage that you want for your dress. When it came to the straps, this looks like a halter here, but really it crisscrosses in the back. And I made a beautiful motif using basically a chain and then some scallop stitches intermixed onto the chain. So it has a beautiful little textured look, and then I decided to crisscross them in the back because given the nature of crochet, sometimes it does stretch or gets heavier when you're wearing it. So I envision this for walking around on a vacation, and I didn't want to fiddle with the straps coming down if I have a bag or something, so I just decided to crisscross them. But that was part of the fun too. You could come up with any kind of design that you like for the top. And I find that Pinterest is a great resource for garment design and crochet charts. Being able to read crochet charts is just being able to identify the stitches in a visual. And there's so many different free resources available to you. That is a great way to experiment and practice and decide what different shape works for you and for your body. And it's just, I recommend Pinterest if you are looking into trying to get ideas for garment design or for your own top. Whereas you can very well use granny squares also and just put them on the bias so that they're kind of diamond shape and make your top to look like that. When it came to doing the final touches, I did give it a little scallop row around the base of it at the skirt, just because I feel like it makes it look a little more finished. And when I decided on the join, this is another lesson learned for doing garment design and granny squares, and it's just kind of trial by error. But at first I thought that I was going to do a join as you go, because that's what I did for the blanket that I showed you previously. It's joined by join as you go. However, the thing with join as you go is you have to account for those stitches that are joining adding to the width of your overall granny square. So once I tried joining them as join with you go and I put it on, it was way too loose for how I envisioned this dress fitting. So I frogged that out, and what I actually decided to do was just a single crochet join on the back side of the work. So if I do it on the back side of the work, the front is left with this just basic crochet stitch look, and all of the 3D joins are going to be on the back. So when I turn it over, you can see the white yarn that I used to join along the back of these squares, but on the front it just looks completely finished. So that's the join that I decided to use on this, and it didn't add any width to the overall dress. So the timeline for this dress took me about 2 months to make, from receiving the yarn to coming up with the concept and brainstorming different ideas. I drew down a little sketch. I made the flowers on the granny squares first. Like I made a bunch of individual flowers kind of like in an assembly line, and then I went back with the white and lined all the flowers for my granny squares. So I feel like that was just the process that I took rather than making granny square from start to finish. And then after I did the flowers and after I made them into a square, I weaved in all the ends. So I just prefer to make granny squares kind of in that assembly line. It just works better for me. After I made all the squares, I like laid them out and loosely joined them to try it on, and that's when I realized like I had actually too many squares, so I had to go back to the drawing board. That's when I added the little half granny squares to the center on the hip side, and then I decided that I wanted to do this bralette motif that I had used before. So I made these in 2 separate cups basically, and I used the Acacia print yarn for these and then just outlined it in white. I made those separately and joined them on. I made the straps separately and joined those on last, and then I did the scalloped edge at the bottom of the skirt. I worked from the back side of the dress, so everything that I was seeing was the back side. That way if I have any like ugly ends that I'm tying it or whatever, it's not on the front of the dress, it's on the back of the dress. So that's one thing that I like to do also, is kind of like just work from the back side, checking as you go on the front side like how it's gonna look. So once I had my colors chose, I decided, okay, I want to do a garment for summer. I should just make a classic granny square dress because they're so pretty and seemingly easy to make. And so I went on Pinterest again and just was popping through different inspiration ideas from fashion to what other people have pinned, just to get some different ideas and not like fully copy something, but just take elements of each design, say, okay, I like that about this, that about that, the color, the motif, the arrangement, the length, the style, different things like this, and kind of come up with my own concept and idea. And so I took different elements and then I jotted them down in a sketchbook and just kind of roughly drew it out and said to myself, okay, well, I'm probably going to need to take measurements for how many squares I'm going to need around, and then it led to deciding what type of square to use. So I knew that I either wanted to do stripes or granny squares, but I thought that with the blue and white stripes there weren't like enough colors. If I do stripes, I feel like I want it to be more multicolor than just 2 or 3 colors, so I decided to go with granny squares. And the granny square motif was based on the previous blanket design, the meadow flowers blanket, because I've used that motif before. It's a granny square that I love, and I kind of wanted to see how it worked with different yarn, and so I think it turned out beautifully. If you've checked out the tutorial, let me know what you think too. Let me know what colors you're using, because I think flowers are such a fun way to crochet, because it could just be never ending with flowers, right? Like they can be any color. So I decided about the granny squares, and then I decided that with the blue and the white, I could either do white flowers with a blue square or vice versa. So I chose blue flowers, white square, and I wanted the dress to have an overall like clean, fresh look. So I decided that white would be the primary color when you're first looking at it. So like it has blue, but I feel like when you first look at it, it's a white dress with blue flowers, because I could have gone blue dress with white flowers. But that's just the idea that I decided on. So when I got to crocheting, I made a whole bunch of blue flowers, and the flowers are actually really simple. They're just made over a few rounds, and so like once you get that down, it's just easy to sit there, and while you're listening to an audiobook or watching something on TV, you can just sit there and make the flowers. Then I like to put them in a little basket where I keep everything, like the flowers, the yarn, the crochet hook, the scissors, and then as I progressed along, I just started outlining them in white to make the square shape, you know, to square it off. If you followed along with the tutorial, you already know what I'm talking about. But I made a bunch of squares and just piled them up. And really, I was honestly surprised with how much yarn came out of this acacia ball. It only took me 2 balls of this to make all these squares for this whole dress. Like, there's so much yarn packed into this ball, and this is 100 grams, so I feel like it's just very dense with what you get for this yarn. Like some yarns I feel like you use and you feel like you've hardly even done anything and all of a sudden it's gone. But with this one, I was like surprised with how many squares I actually got out of it. I think I got something like 32 blue flowers out of one of these balls, and then I ended up making 56. So I needed 2 of the blue balls to make the 56 flowers, and then probably like 3 of these white balls to do the outlining and then the straps and the seaming and all that kind of stuff. So really I was very impressed with how much yarn came out of this Acacia. And another thing with the Acacia that I was realizing like as I was making this, so one, I kind of like upped the hook size. I chose a 6mm hook and recommended as a 5mm. And then with the granny square motif, it does have these holes in the center, so that gives you like a little bit of like a 1/2 inch stretch when you're wearing it. And then on top of that, the yarn itself is stretchy. So those were some things to take into consideration when I started to like finally pin the squares together to wear to form into a dress. Once I got all the squares made, I decided to do the tutorial for you guys. So that's the step in the process that I was at when I filmed that tutorial. And then I started to join them together for the dress. I filmed little bits and pieces of the dress assembly, knowing that I'm going to come on with this video right now and show you some of the design elements. It's not a full tutorial showing you how to make the dress because I want to keep this kind of freehand. I love the inspiration from this community and I want you guys to be able to kind of design it how you want. But my main goal in this video is giving you elements of crochet design and some lessons learned that I had. So I filmed the tutorial, I started to lay out the squares, and I find it really helpful to have like just a flat surface, whether that is your kitchen table or the floor, or what I've actually got is a card table in my craft room. It's just, I have a card table and just can lay everything out because it's really helpful to see. Because you can kind of like do the math in your head and say, okay, I'm gonna need 9 squares, 9 squares, 9 squares. And then like you get kind of confused, especially once you start assembling it all. So just laying it out to see everything. And I started just with a front panel and a back panel is how I decided to join everything rather than join them in the round. I joined them flat and then seam them together. So I joined the front panel at the bottom and then just worked up until I got to more of the shaping at the hips. And I decided on the single crochet joint on the back. I actually used like a very fine weight crochet thread for that. I didn't use the Acacia to join them. And that way also, if I needed to frog for any reason, it's easier to see where I joined if I'm using a slightly different yarn. Because if I'm using the same yarn to join and then I need to cut it for some reason or like frog it, it's harder to see where those joins are because the yarn blends in. So I use a slightly different yarn for joining. That way I can just see where my joins are and it's just easier for me as the person like actually making it. And I don't sew in any ends on the joins until the end because that way if I need to adjust something, I don't have to go through and pick everything out. So I just kind of join them in panels for the front and the back. Once I got to the ribs, like from the hips going in, and I realized that putting an extra square there would just make it too wide, I decided to do the half granny squares. So the half granny squares are basically just doing like this much of the granny square, and instead of fiddling with making the flower, all I did was basically just make the center arch. So adding the half granny squares was really like the key element of this design because I feel like it just came together on the hips so well and just gave the granny squares like a smooth kind of sultry like look for this summer dress. So it took it from being a little too baggy to like really fitted. So I feel like the half granny squares really saved the day on that. And I decided I could have either done it like higher up at the armpits or I could have done it like lower down just above the hips, and I decided to do it just above the hips, and that way it comes in like this. And then I just added 2 more rows of granny squares to be the waist before adding the bralette pieces. Once I added the bralette pieces on the back, like it came a little low for me in the back, and so I added another row of 3 granny squares onto the back to match like where the bralette pieces are. And that just like really brought the design together for me. I think especially like when you're designing your own, like you can make it as coverage or less coverage that you like, so that was like a great thing. And then when it came to the straps, I mean, just super simple to do some easy straps. And I made mine about 7 inches long because I knew that if I started making them any longer, which at the time seems like, okay, these might feel a little tight, but then when you're wearing it, they suddenly get loose. You know what I mean? Like if you've ever made anything with cotton, you know what I mean. Like there's a little bit of like, it starts to hang under the weight of the garment when you're wearing it. So I made them a little on the short side, so they're 7 inches long, but hopefully that's okay. Like as I'm wearing it now, it feels completely fine. It feels like very in place. I'm not having to tug on it or anything, which is great. And so if you're trying to figure out how to adjust sizes or make wearables from granny squares, I hope that you're able to find a few tips from this video. And I know that I've gotten a lot of feedback on how to do grading for sizes. So hopefully like some of these lessons learned on the stretch and the little like half granny square on the side was helpful to you as you're making wearables for yourself at home, especially if you're thinking about doing something with granny squares. So I'm so happy with how this dress turned out, not only because it's cute for summer, but because it really taught me so much as a designer and maker. And I would love to know what you guys are working on at home, what kind of freehand designs that you're working on, anything that you want to share with me in comments. If you've used Acacia yarn before, let me know what you think of it too. If you've ever made a granny square dress or anything like that, I can't wait to chat with you in comments. And thanks so much for watching, you guys. As always, stay colorful. Thanks so much for watching. You can find more of these videos on my playlist that's called Crochet Design and Inspiration. Big thank you to Hobby for sponsoring today's video and letting me try out this yarn. While this video is sponsored, all opinions are 100% my own, and I'm sharing honest thoughts and reviews in this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that little notification bell for more.